Before Amanda Cardwell was 25 years old, her marital circumstances pushed Georgia legislators to extend property rights to married women. Amanda was born in 1844 in Georgia to a prominent Southern family. When her father, John Cardwell, died in 1859, he left to Amanda his Georgia property, including his home on the outskirts of Madison, and all his money, which he supposed at this time to amount to $80,000 or thereabouts. In his will, Mr. Cardwell requested that his daughter remain at Salem Female Academy in North Carolina until she reached 18 years of age, to carry out a request of her deceased mother. Despite her father's wishes, Amanda moved back to Madison, where she married Junius Pope Smith on October 20th, 1860. She was 16 years old. Junius and Amanda moved into her late father's beautiful home, about a mile and a half from the Morgan County Courthouse.
The house had been left to this lady by her parents, but at that time, a woman couldn't own property in the state of Georgia. So it was in her husband's name. Well, her husband got into an all-night poker game, and he lost the house 3 times to a man by Mr. Name Man. And Mr. Man told him, says, if you lose this house again, and it was the house and all that was in the house, said, I'm going to take it. Well, Mr. Smith lost the house. So they had nowhere to go, and everybody was going to Texas, so Mr. Smith and his wife, who had owned the house, went to Texas. And out in Texas, she killed her husband. But I can tell you, if he had been my husband, I'd have killed him before we ever got to Texas, losing my house and possessions. But there are a lot of tales about Madison that people tell that I don't quite think is true, but a lot of them are.
Actually, Amanda divorced Junius and moved to Texas. In 1867, she married Robert Mitchell Rutherford, a physician. In 1880, Junius was living in the Durden district of Morgan County, boarding with William J. Mann, the 25-year-old son of James Mann, who had won Amanda's house in the poker game. Junius died unexpectedly in 1893 after a short illness. He was buried in Madison's old cemetery near his mother Jane, his father Guy, and the 2-year-old son he and Amanda lost in January 1864. As a result of Amanda's story, state legislator William H. Woods and D.E. Butler, along with the help of John Durden, a neighbor of William Mann, aroused interest in the passage of a bill protecting women's property rights. The bill became the Georgia's Married Women's Property Act and was approved on December 13, 1866. The Act of 1866 provided, all the property of the wife at the time of her marriage, whether real, personal, or choses in action, shall be and remain the separate property of the wife, and all property given to or acquired by the wife during coverture shall vest in and belong to the wife, and shall not be liable for payment of any debt, default, or contract of the husband. Sadly, the act was too late for Amanda. She never regained her property. She died on May 27, 1898, and was buried in Glenwood Cemetery in Houston, along with her husband, her brother John Cardwell, and his wife Mary. Born in 1869, Lula Hurst had a normal childhood, living with her family in Polk County, Georgia, until at the age of 14. I discovered the beginning of my force the night of the 18th day of September, 1883. It was a very dark night. An electric storm was raging without. The atmosphere was charged with electricity on account of the severe storm. Word spread quickly throughout Cedartown and beyond. Hundreds of people traveled from as far away as Rome and Atlanta to witness the mysterious powers that Lula seemed to possess. Their house became known as the Haunted House. It was not long before the editor of the Rome Daily Bulletin visited Lula's father, William E. Hurst, and begged for Lula to give an exhibition at the Nevin Opera House. Mr. Hurst agreed, and Lula was soon on the stage. The house was hilarious and wildly enthusiastic. It was fun and mystery mixed in wild confusion.
Well, she was our neighbor, just 2 houses over from here, and I knew her as a child as just Miss Paul Atkinson. Mr. Paul Atkinson was quite an entrepreneur, and he owned what later became the background painting for the Cyclorama in Atlanta. He had been touring with that painting and doing lectures about it. But he heard this, what was happening to Lula Hurst, and thought, boy, what an attraction that would be, because Lula had all sorts of strange powers. She could take a chair with a man sitting in it and lift him up in the air in one hand, no problem. So he thought, boy, if she can demonstrate that, this would add to my lecture series. So he persuaded her to go with him on his lecture tour. And she did, and became very famous. There were articles about her all over the country about Lula Hurst and her remarkable capabilities.
My grandfather had seen her twice. He had seen her once in Madison, and then he went to Charleston, South Carolina. And he thought she was a great person.
Our people were astounded at the unnatural powers exhibited by Miss Lula Hurst in her recent entertainment at Foster's Hall. She is a cyclone, a 40-horsepower engine, a bundle of dynamite, all in one. If you don't believe it, just give her a round and you will think that John L. Sullivan has commenced wearing dresses. But skepticism of Lula's powers were growing, and she decided to retire from the stage in 1885, when she was only 16. She returned to Rome and attended Shorter Female College. If I can't explain this thing, I can at least hide it and give the public mind a rest. If I do not succeed in this undertaking, I resolve to the day of my death to remain in the seclusion of my quiet home life and carry with me in solitude to my grave the mystery of the great unknown.
So she quit, and we had a copy of a Chicago newspaper, and the headline on it was, "Whatever happened to Lula Hurst?" She had just disappeared.
Following college, Lula once again was in the public spotlight. Miss Lula Hurst, the electric wonder, was married one day last week to Mr. Paul M. Atkinson, her late manager, formerly of Madison, Georgia, but now of Chattanooga, Tennessee. Miss Lula cleared $100,000, retired from the stage, returned to college in Rome, Georgia, graduated, and like a sensible young woman, married an industrious and sober young man. Lula and Paul soon moved to a house on Main Street in Madison, Georgia.
Paul Atkinson and Lula lived in front of the Madison-Morgan County Cultural Center. That's their home. And one day, I went to my grandparents' house. I was 10 years old by that time. And my grandfather sat down, he said, "Carol, I've got something to tell you." He said, "I want to talk to you about Aunt Lula." I said, "What about her?" He said, "Did you know she was on the stage at one time?" I said, "No, what did she do?" And he looked at me and twinkled in his eye and said, "Well, she could levitate things, and men could stand on a table, and she could pick that table up with one finger." But he said, "Now you've got to keep this a secret." And I said, "Why do I have to keep it a secret?" He said, "Well, when she got off the stage, she never wanted it to be known that she was ever on stage." Well, that night I came home and I got my bicycle, and I bet I rode by her house 20 times thinking that she was in there moving something. I never saw a thing in the house move. I think she was a great Southern lady. She did more to encourage young ladies to get out in the field and work and go into the business world. And she kept a lot of the young ladies there in her house. They were boarders and went to school here and worked in Madison. So it was just a wonderful story. I never did tell the secret, though, until after she died.
Louise McHenry broke the mold of the proper early 20th century young lady. Her dramatic readings on stage and radio and love of local history helped put Madison on the map. Louise was the daughter of John Grieve and Zoe Blackshear McHenry. Born May 26, 1891, in the Stokes-McHenry house. The home had already sheltered generations of the family in Madison for nearly 70 years. She attended schools in Madison before graduating from Shorter Female College in Rome in 1910, majoring in speech and dramatic art. She then taught speech at the local high school for one term.
And after that, I think she wanted to practice what she'd been teaching and preaching. So she did something that raised a few eyebrows in this little sleepy southern town. At that time, she went on the stage. And young southern girls just didn't do that in those days.
Louise signed a contract with the Alcahest Lyceum Bureau, the country's first lecture, concert, and theatrical booking management company. She traveled for the next 4 years through many states as an entertainer, doing platform work, plays, Dickens sketches, and original numbers. In 1916, at the age of 25, Louise married Dan Hicky of New Orleans. They moved to Nashville, where their only child, a son, Dan McHenry, was born. They called him Laddie. 4 years later, the young Hicky family was living in Madison in the old home on First Street, together with Louise's parents and her sister Hallie. Louise continued her theatrical pursuits. A play she wrote, simply called Happy, was performed in the high school auditorium. The Eatonton Messenger described it this way: given by the best theatrical talent in Madison, not a dull moment, just laughs, jolly times, pretty girls, and the last word in the chorus. It's funny, smart, and wholesome. To help with the family income, Louise received her General Elementary Teacher's Certificate from the University of Georgia and taught English and history in Rome, and then at the A&M School of Madison. The next decade saw tremendous change. Louise worked for the Georgia Power Company in Madison and in Conyers. In April 1932, she returned to Nashville, where she did some independent advertising modeling work. She was also the on-air radio personality for station WLAC's program, Miss Chloe and Aunt Valentine.
And she loved that because she could write the scripts and then play all the parts herself, doing all the parts like you could on radio. And the program consisted of a kind of advice to the love lawn thing. She posed as a Southern lady who had gone to the big city to make her living. And she took her old housekeeper along with her to look after the house while she was working. And one day she got a letter from a young girl who said, I really need some advice. I'm going with two nice young men. They have both asked me to marry them, and I don't know which one to accept. She said, one is the vice president of a bank. He makes real good money. I know if I married him, I'd never have any financial problems, but he's just kind of boring to be with. She said the other one is a wonderful conversationalist, good dancer, a lot of fun to be with, but he just can't make a living. She said, now which one should I accept? That's the kind of show my mother had on radio.
During World War II, Louise served as chief clerk of the Morgan County Selective Service Board. In 1948, she wrote the foreword for the Morgan County Historical Record, a bound volume of the county's servicemen and women during the war. She was later recognized for her work with the United States Army Recruiting Service. She was feature editor and bookkeeper of the Madisonian and wrote a popular column, By the Way, which ran for 15 years. She wrote historic articles for Georgia Review and Georgia Magazine, and was a published poet and popular public speaker. In 1971, at age 80, she published Rambles Through Morgan County and gave the copyright to the Morgan County Historical Society. This was the only published history of the county at the time. Adelaide Ponder, editor of the Madisonian, described Louise this way in her July 31st, 1975 column, Ponderings. Louise McHenry Hicky has been a valuable asset to Madison all the years of her life. A charming person, she has unselfishly shared her knowledge and her talent for a variety of causes. She has brought Madison reams of positive and rewarding publicity through her writings and through the talks she gives so well. Louise died October 14, 1984, at the age of 93.
My first teacher, her name was Hazeltine Mitchell. Her husband was pastor of the church, and his name was Walter Mitchell. They have a daughter who's living now. She lives in Atlanta. Her name is Rosalind, Dr. Rosalind Patterson. I was told that she was the first African American from Morgan County to have received a doctorate degree. I think Rosalind went on and she taught for years at Spelman College, I believe.
The family's incredible story began over a century ago in Morgan County when her mother was born in 1905 to Fannie and Thomas Randall. Fannie Harris Randall died from pneumonia. She had just finished sewing Easter clothes for her children, including 3-year-old Hazeltine, named for Fannie's mother. Thomas, also ill from pneumonia, was overcome with grief and stopped eating. He died within a week of Fannie's death, leaving 8 orphans, who ranged in age from 11 years to 7 months old. The young Randall family lived on North Main Street near Fannie's parents, Harrison and Tallulah Hazeltine Harris, likely born into slavery. Both were now in their late 60s. Now they were faced with the prospects of taking in 8 orphans, their grandchildren. Proceedings to appoint Harrison Harris as guardian of the minor orphans were filed in the Morgan County office of the Ordinary on May 10, 1909 by Madison attorney E.R. Lambert. The order was granted November 3rd. 3 of the Randall children stayed in Madison with their grandparents. 3 other Randall children went to live in Salisbury, North Carolina, and were adopted by Fannie's sister, Sue Jett, and her husband, Hercules Smith. Hazeltine was adopted by Belle and Love Jones, who lived in the corner of Blue Moon Hill and Whitehall Street in the Canaan neighborhood of Madison. Belle owned a restaurant which she had opened a few years earlier. Belle Jones, the wife of Love Jones, wishes to inform the public that she has opened a first-class quick lunchroom in the rear of Sidwell's Market, and solicits the patronage of the public. Meals will be served at all hours. She is a well-known and well-thought-of colored woman, and proposes to conduct a neat and attractive lunchroom for both white and blacks. Hazeltine Jones grew up on Whitehall Street and attended the Burney Street School, which at that time only went to the 10th grade. Her grandparents so valued education that they then sent Hazeltine to Salisbury, North Carolina, to live with her aunt, Sue Jett, where she was able to complete the 12th grade at Price High School. She graduated as valedictorian. She went on to attend Livingston College in Salisbury before enrolling at Spelman College in Atlanta, graduating from the nurse training program in 1927. Following graduation from Spelman, Hazeltine became a registered nurse and worked for a time at the McHenry Hospital in Madison. However, it was not long before she began to feel nursing was not her true calling. In 1932, she left McHenry Hospital and took a job as a teacher at the Stanton Grove School in the western part of Morgan County, some 15 miles away from her home. This was during the height of the Great Depression, and just getting to her job was a difficult task. Hazeltine soon learned of a program of emergency nursery schools established by the Works Progress Administration in 1933. She successfully applied for and was awarded a grant to start a nursery school for black children in her Canaan neighborhood. With the grant money, her father, Love Jones, built a small building behind their home on Whitehall, where Hazeltine provided not only daycare services, but also education for the children of out-of-work African Americans. This experience marked the beginning of Hazeltine's long career as an educator in Morgan County. Meanwhile, Hazeltine continued to help out at her parents' restaurant, located at the time in the Map Building on West Washington Street. It was here that she met a Greene County preacher who had come to Madison to visit his children from a previous marriage. Walter Melvin Mitchell and Hazeltine V. Jones married October 16, 1937. Their daughter, Rosalind Victoria, was born in 1939. Belle passed away before her granddaughter was born, but the Mitchell family continued to live on Whitehall Street with Rosalind's grandfather, Love Jones. Hazeltine's niece visited her Madison family when she was in elementary school. Soon to be 91 years old, Frenzella Randall Cradle remembers Aunt Teeny as a kind and pleasant woman who lived in a tidy wood shingle house with a fenced yard filled with little white ducks. It is one of her fondest childhood memories. Hazeltine returned to teaching at Stanton Grove, then later at Holland Springs, and finally at Smyrna School, where her husband, Reverend Mitchell, pastored at the Smyrna Baptist Church. Hazeltine was also active in community and civic affairs. She served as an officer in the Morgan County Improvement Association. Hazeltine Virginia Randall Jones Mitchell, born the granddaughter of a slave, an orphan at 3 years old, a nurse, and a teacher, passed away March 6, 1987. She was 82.
Those folks, that family, they were always favorites of mine.
Looking for a better place to raise her children, stage and media personality Annie Lee Small found the perfect business opportunity in Madison in 1959. Annie Lee Stagg was born July 19, 1920 in Elba, Alabama, to Mary and Olin Whitfield Stagg. She was primarily reared in Jacksonville, Florida. She began her radio career at age 12 when she walked into WMBR Radio of Jacksonville and asked for an audition. She was given a weekly program of poetry readings entitled Gems of Thought, which aired every Sunday afternoon.
When I went to work, the radio station in Jacksonville was on the top floor of the Carling Hotel, and we were just in regular bedrooms, and they had black curtains all around the wall, and microphones hung from the ceiling and looked like frying pans with that kind of thing. And they would have radio as long as they had somebody there live to do it, because they didn't have any tapes or anything like that.
Annie Lee was also very interested in becoming an actress. In high school, when she starred in Little Women, the newspaper reported, "It is not difficult to remember Stagg as Jo March. She rollicked through that part with the pleasant assurance of one born to the theatrical boards." Following graduation from high school, Annie Lee enrolled in the private female college, Stevens College, in Columbia, Missouri. Although she included radio in her curriculum, Annie Lee really wanted to be an actress, and she was drawn to the idea of studying with Maude Adams, the famed Broadway actress known for her portrayal as Peter Pan, who is now Stevens College Drama Department chair and teacher. She immersed herself in everything the drama department had to offer. She received outstanding reviews for her performance as Mary, Mother of Jesus, in the controversial play Family Portrait. However, the innately serious Annie Lee continued to work at a local radio station while juggling her studies at Stevens. After graduation in 1940, Annie Lee was soon modeling for the John Powers Agency in New York, while doing spot work in radio for Miss Margaret Cuthbert, Director of Women's Activities for the National Broadcasting Company. In December that year, Annie Lee became Director of Women's Activities for station WFMJ in Youngstown, Ohio. In 1943, Annie Lee visited the Atlanta radio station, WSB, located in the Biltmore Hotel. It was one of the nation's most powerful radio signals at that time. As she had done years earlier at the age of 12 in Jacksonville, Annie Lee went to look things over and walked out with a job. She began as a staff announcer, but within 6 months she was promoted to assistant production manager. Annie Lee's perfectly pitched, well-modulated voice was heard all over the country and as far away as the South Pacific. She even received fan mail from soldiers who were stationed across the seas. In February 1945, she organized an event for the premiere of the war movie God is My Co-Pilot in Macon, Georgia, and landed interviews with stars like Alan Hale and Andrea King. When President Roosevelt died in April that year at Warm Springs, Georgia, Annie Lee was dispatched to cover the news for the Atlanta NBC affiliate. On June 6, 1945, Annie Lee married Lieutenant James Fenton Small, a naval aviator she met while working for WSB. By 1952, the Smalls had moved to Charleston, South Carolina. Annie Lee went to work for WCSC-TV Channel 5, where she quickly became program director. She was known for her women's shows and had a reputation as the adventure lady on her popular children's program.
I was in television in Charleston, and we loved Charleston, but it was no place to raise our children. It's a different kind of a thing. And so one night when Jim and I came in from having entertained customers, we were sitting at our old porcelain kitchen table talking, and we decided we didn't want to raise our children in Charleston. And so we would buy a radio station. So we started looking for one, and we found this one, and came over here and got here in the wee hours of the night and stayed at a motel on the other end of town and got up the next morning and started with our appointments. And that afternoon we'd bought the station. It was a wonderful experience, you know. Our friends in Charleston said, "You'll never last. You just won't do it." Because we had never lived in a little town.
In June 2005, the Smalls celebrated their 60th wedding anniversary at a gala at Full Circle Farm in Morgan County. Annie Lee died September 21, 2008, and is buried alongside her husband in the Madison Memorial Cemetery. She was inducted into the Georgia Radio Hall of Fame, October 2013. Every day at lunch, my grandmother would listen to Annie Lee Small, a great memory from my grandmother's kitchen. Oh, how well do I remember good old days. Rosalind Elizabeth Wallace was a brilliant scientist who gave her life to research a cure for cancer. She was born July 30th, 1924, in the small town of Rutledge, Georgia, just west of Madison. After graduating from Rutledge High in 1940, she attended Brenau Women's College in Gainesville, Georgia, with a plan to study English and perhaps become a journalist. As luck would have it, Roslyn enrolled in a biology class taught by Yale-educated Dr. Benjamin J. Caiston, one of the nation's foremost spider scientists. The web was spun, and Roslyn went on to graduate from Brenau in 1944 with a degree in biology. Roslyn continued her education, finally completing a doctorate in biology from Harvard. She earned a Fulbright Award and studied in Paris. Roslyn began her career in the late 1940s in New York. She began working on a vaccine for polio, but switched to cancer research, creating research practices and cancer therapies that are still used today.
She got all kind of awards and Fulbright scholarship and studied in Paris. Then got a job at Letterly Laboratories in New York, Pearl River, New York. Moved in the upstairs of a house that this couple, Mr. and Miss Wirtz, rented upstairs of their house. They didn't have children. They fell in love with Roslyn and considered her their daughter. When they died, they left the home to Aunt Roslyn. Then Aunt Roslyn rented the upstairs to young people who got jobs at Letterly Laboratories.
Growing up, Roslyn was quite the tomboy. Her father built her a dollhouse, but she was not interested in dolls. Instead, she declared it her clubhouse and invited all her friends to choose a name. Her schoolmate and her cousin Adelaide's future husband, Graham Ponder's name, was drawn from a jar, and the clubhouse became appropriately Chum's Delight. Her mother made her pretty dresses with lots of ruffles, but she never imagined that Rosalind would wear them to ride her motorcycle or drive her cousins, Adelaide and Anne, on afternoon buggy rides.
Aunt Rosalind was very, very intelligent, very interested in science, very interested in math, and she just was a prankster. She's always getting into something because she got bored at school because she was always far ahead of everybody else in what's going on. But what she's most famous for, she was in school, the water tower was right there at the school, and I'm thinking she was about 9 or 10 or something like that, and somebody just dared her to do it, so she climbed that little bitty ladder up to the top of the water tower and walked around the water tower and was waving to everybody down there, and then the principal, Mr. Ivy, came out and all the school teachers, you know, and had to make her come down. But anyway, that's what she's most famous for. That's walking the water tower.
According to her niece, Teresa Wallace, Burnell gave Roslyn the confidence to pursue her dreams. When she died July 18, 2009, at the age of 84, the nationally recognized pharmaceutical researcher left almost her entire estate to Burnell to help young women like her who were interested in math and science. Roslyn is buried in the Rutledge Cemetery in a small town where she grew up, next to her mother and father. Her obituary reads, "She will be remembered for her kindness, gentle nature, courage, and taking a challenge." Adelaide Wallace Ponder's Morgan County roots run deep. Born April 16, 1925, to Leonard Dewey and Anne Douglas Wallace of Madison, Georgia, she was a direct descendant of Morgan County's first known settler, Benjamin Fitzpatrick.
I've lived in Madison always, except for going away to school. And 6 months I spent writing advertising copy in Atlanta, but otherwise I've been here. I've always lived on either South Main or Old Post Road. It was really sort of a dream place now that I see how much it's changed. But it was quiet, and everybody knew everybody much more so than they do today. And everybody in elementary school anyway went to public school, so you knew everybody practically who grew up here.
Adelaide's interest in journalism began in high school when she served as editor-in-chief of The Polygon, a column in the Madisonian with information of interest from the Madison Public Schools. She continued her studies at Wesleyan College in Macon, Georgia, serving as editor of both the newspaper and yearbook. She graduated with honors with an A.B. degree in English literature and journalism in 1946. Following graduation, she worked for several months as society editor of the Madisonian and then moved to Atlanta as a copywriter in the advertising department of the J.P. Allen store. On April 24, 1948, Adelaide married William Graham Ponder at the First Methodist Church in Madison.
I think the thing that draws people here is that you form friendships when you grow up, and just like the lifestyle, it's a pleasant lifestyle. And if there's a family business, or if there is something that sort of suits your career, and I think it's fortunate. I came back because Graham went in business with his father, and we married. And so I gave up my great job writing fashion advertising. Later on, the newspaper came up for sale, and the cotton world was sort of falling apart. And I told Graham that I knew everything about running a newspaper because I had edited the college newspaper, and I didn't. But we bought it, and I did all the editorial work, and he did the business end. So we enjoyed it a lot. It was unusual for a woman to be editor, because I remember going in the drugstore where everybody seemed to gather soon afterwards to get a Coca-Cola. And I heard someone behind the fountain say, "Well, I give her about 3 months." So I thought about that 40 years later when we sold the paper.
Adelaide and Graham purchased the Madisonian in 1957, the 150th anniversary of the founding of Morgan County. She served as editor and he as publisher. In the first issue of the Ponders Madisonian, the new editor stated, "We are here to stay. We are rooted in this community. We feel the prime purpose of a newspaper lies in the service to the people."
There were a lot of exciting things. It was always sort of a challenge. One of the biggest things that happened to us was the school crisis, when there was a difference of a feeling on integrating the public schools, and our paper took a very moderate stand, and we weren't always the most popular people in the world, but I think it helped. We didn't have any of the bad trouble that a lot of towns had and a lot of schools had.
Christine Lambert, her longtime friend, said this of Adelaide: "She has been a treasure for this community because of the stances she took with her newspaper editorials. She just had a way of, when sticky issues came up, putting it in print without being inflammatory." Adelaide's influence was felt beyond the pages of the Madisonian. She was one of the first women named to the UGA Grady School of Journalism Advisory Board, and also served as an instructor at the school. She was the first woman to serve as chair of the Georgia Press Institute. Noted Georgia author Philip Lee Williams, one of the first student interns at the Madisonian, remembers Ponder as his first mentor. "I owe more than I could possibly repay to Adelaide. She was never too busy to help and always brave and courageous. She was never afraid to jump into any issue with both feet. It was a time of great madness across the South. They led the fight for moderation, understanding, and reconciliation." Under the Ponders' leadership, the Madisonian received a record 9 Georgia Press Association awards. Among the judges' comments, "I wish I had your editor at one of my newspapers." Together with Christine Lambert, she co-chaired the Madison Beautification Committee and was credited with arousing an interest in city restoration and beautification, promoting tourism, and revising local economy. As an arts enthusiast, she played an instrumental role in the conceptualization, fundraising, and creation of the Madison-Morgan Cultural Center, serving as co-chair of the building committee for the Morgan County Foundation, Incorporated.
One of the bad things that happened in those years was that we lost so many good old houses, beautiful places, to filling stations, because this was becoming a thoroughfare. And some of the nicest houses were torn down. And that was one reason we made such a major effort to save the building the cultural center's housed in, because we were afraid it was headed for demolition and being either a filling station or that would hurt another part of town. So I think it's answered a great purpose by being an arts center.
Lambert called Adelaide a visionary. "She and I were invited to join the Morgan County Foundation when it was an all-male board. She could wave her hand and talk about a performing arts center and have us all mesmerized. She had the vision to see what it could be." Adelaide went on to serve as a board member of the Georgia Trust for Historic Preservation. In 1993, she received the Governor's Award in the Humanities for her volunteer efforts. Adelaide was individually recognized in 1994 when she received the Emma C. McKinney Award. National Newspaper Association chairman stated, "She makes a difference for the good in everything in which she is involved." After 4 decades, the Ponders sold the Madisonian in 1996. Although Adelaide no longer had the day-to-day responsibilities of overseeing an award-winning newspaper, she remained a strong force in Madison and beyond. In 2001, Adelaide was appointed by the Madison Bicentennial Committee to join a fundraising committee for a legacy project. She and Christine Lambert teamed up again, raising over $1 million for the creation of the Madison Town Park. The project included sensitive renovation and rehabilitation of a modest 19th century brick structure known as the Old Southern Express, the office used by cotton brokers Paul Holloway Ponder and his son Graham.
That little building they call the Ponder Building is probably, along with the railroad station, the oldest. And I'm glad that they are going to save it with the park.
After nearly 6 decades of service to Madison, Graham and Adelaide retired to St. Simon's Island, where 2 of their daughters lived. Graham passed away in 2013. Adelaide died at age 90 in 2015. They are both buried in Madison's Old Cemetery.